Today on the podcast, we have listener Tyler. He's going to tell us all about his adventures. Good evening, podcast listeners. We have a great episode coming up here. We have finally gotten listener Tyler, who's a big fan of ours, to my understanding, to join us on the podcast. So say hello, Tyler.
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's fantastic having you on the show. I look forward to your topic here. This is Lotus, and with me in the studio is always
QuicKarl.
And we are broadcasting from a remote location that I believe is, listener Tyler told us to say that it's classified. My understanding. So I can neither confirm nor deny the existence of this podcast in this location. There are a couple of housekeeping items that we have. Number one, since the budget on the podcast is very, 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 very low. Like I believe, what is it? What's in our account? How much money is in our account?
And this might be a good time to give them an address to send checks to.
Okay, yeah. Well, we can't send. They can't come here. This is classified.
We'll make it work.
Okay. All right. Well, so since the budget is very, 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 very low, we are going to eliminate previous podcasts as new podcasts come out. So if whatever we can only host on the podcast service that we use, we can only host so many podcasts. So as we create new ones, then the oldest podcast will go away. However, feel free to email us at socraticneighbors@gmail.com, and we can send you a link so that you can download all the podcasts, except for the most recent one. The most recent one will get added after the most recent podcast will get added after the next podcast comes out. So there is a way for you to download them all on your phone. However, on YouTube, if you are subscribed on YouTube, all of the podcasts will remain on there. It is just on our iTunes, Google Play, and Podomatic services, as well as any services that are broadcast through those will not have access to previous podcasts. And so our first episode will not be on iTunes starting this week, since we are running out of space because Podomatic is a jerk. I'm just kidding. No, we love you, Podomatic. It's free. So we're gonna stick to free. And if our listeners want to get more listeners, once we reach our data cap, then we will talk about adding more money into the show and trying to find sponsors.
Yeah, if you want to advertise with us, by all means, give us a call.
Yeah.
Or email us at the address we have.
Yes.
And like I said, we'll unshamingly take your money.
I think it'd be great to listen to you guys do advertisements.
Advertisements, yeah.
You guys could do some product placement.
Yeah, definitely.
There we go.
So before we begin and get into the topic, listener Tyler, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm 31 years old. I'm married. I have 3 kids. I grew up in Colorado, and the last probably 10, 12 years I've been just walking around the country, and also in various locations around the road. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel frequently over the years, and it's become quite a passion of mine. Oh,
cool. So what do you do for a living?
So I specifically work in compliance. I do compliance oversight type work.
Gotcha.
For various organizations.
Various organizations. And you can't go into any specifics?
No specifics, sorry.
No specifics? Was that information classified or something?
No, of course not. If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Oh my gosh. He's whipping out the Top Gun lines early.
You just used a generic term, the company.
The company. Okay. Well, so what's our topic for today? What do you got for us?
Travel.
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 Oh, wow. So passions breed passions, huh?
Exactly. It's about the only thing I really know about.
So, okay. Before we get into QuicKarl, you have any announcements or anything you want to talk about?
Tyler, our other person in the studio today, is also my number 2 son.
Number 2.
Yeah.
That's in order. And
That's in
It's
order.
in order, not that he's number 2, but
Gotcha.
he's the second one. It's kind of a Japanese thing.
Gotcha. Well,
Number 2 son.
my mom always refers to me, Mama Bear always refers to me as the number 1 son.
Yeah, there you go. I noticed she had an accent. I never really thought about it, but now that clears up a lot.
Who?
Your mother.
My mother? Yeah, a little bit. So what about travel do you like? I mean, what aspects of it do you like? I mean, is there...
So, interestingly enough, I actually, I've never been a big fan of flying.
Okay.
But I always wanted to travel. I always had the desire to travel. I kind of grew up in the same place my whole life, and the trips that I would go on were, they were the exciting Midwest
Road trips.
Texas. Yeah, we went on a couple good trips, but they were road trips, and so I definitely had the passion to get out and see more of the road and everything. Mm-hmm. And but I never liked the journey there. And
you never liked the journey, you always liked the destinations?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. But the last couple of years, I'd say that I have come to appreciate the journey a lot more.
Really?
So, exactly. So instead of getting anxiety about an upcoming trip because I have to fly there, or, it's going to be a long trip or whatever it is, I have found myself very much more excited about the whole journey, not just the destination.
Gotcha. Now, is that because of family, or is that more because you get to see things you like seeing things along the way?
It's actually, as far as the journey, why I like the journey aspect of it. So honestly, I think it was just a matter of coping and surviving with the anxiety of the travel.
Gotcha.
It was a way to turn a negative into a positive. Instead of looking at the negative aspects of it, look at the positive aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And once I started doing that, it changed the way that I perceived travel, such as flight anxiety, which a lot of people experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being the son of a pilot, I mean, that conquered that kicked it out of me pretty quick.
I imagine.
But it's interesting because you say that a lot of people I fly with, they hate flying. With a lot of people that I run into, they just don't like the feeling of going up and coming down. They don't like the being, a lot of people, particularly people like my wife, they don't like being enclosed in a tube,
right,
and then having to sit next to somebody that might be bigger than them, know. And so, like, I don't like sitting next to two big guys, but sometimes you can't really do much about that, and like with flying, because my dad's a pilot, we fly standby all the time. So standby, I mean, you're sitting around waiting for a ticket, you're just hoping to get on the plane, let alone like being actively paying for the pleasure of getting a seat. Exactly. And it's funny because I just figured out before I went on the trip that last week was the first time I actually bought an airline ticket, like a legit airline ticket. And I've had airline tickets purchased for me, but I've never gone out and purchased an airline ticket for myself. And so it was really interesting, going out, buying an airline ticket, and then getting on the plane and
with
flying.
The ticket, did you actually get to sit in a seat this time then?
Yeah, I sat in a seat.
Oh,
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they didn't make me stand like a dog in the aisle. So
that's nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's pretty interesting. So where's your top 5 that you like to go to?
Top 5, I would say, would be Germany.
Germany.
Yep. Indonesia. Jordan. England. And Colombia.
Wow.
Yep.
See, I've only been to England. I haven't been to Jordan. I haven't been to Jordan. I haven't been to Colombia, and I would very much like to go to Jordan.
Jordan's beautiful.
I've heard great things.
Yeah.
So what is it about Germany that you really like? Is that because that was the first one you spit out? What is it that you like about Germany?
So I actually lived in Germany for a period of time.
Okay.
And the thing that I really loved about Germany, other than it being a beautiful country, is it's pretty centralized in Europe. So you have access to other parts of Europe. The train system in Europe is amazing, and so it feels like you can go anywhere and have access to anything relatively simple. And if you don't like flying, like I did at one point, the train is a really nice option to have available.
Is that train pretty fast? I mean, it's like, is it a bullet train?
Yeah, some of them. I mean,
some of them.
They have the regular trains. I think they used to call them the. I can't remember actually. There was the commuter trains that they moved at. I think they averaged about 55 to 75 miles per hour, and then they had the bullet trains that were 150, 200, give or take. And then they have some of the like in between type trains. Like I took the train from Brussels to London. You go through the channel with that.
Yeah.
And that train was, you could tell it was really set up for a more like leisurely ride, but it was still fast.
Right.
So, I kind of consider that like an in between.
Yeah. Is it so with the train? Did you like riding the trains for being on trains sometimes, or did you? Yeah.
Well, and the beautiful part with trains and especially in Europe is you get to really experience the countryside while you're traveling.
Right.
It's pretty stress free. It's well, I mean, air travel is safe, so it's not to say that air travel isn't safe.
Right.
But trains are relatively safe. They're easy on and off. There's not a lot of checkpoints that you have to go through in the process, right? Like,
right.
You go, you buy your ticket, you walk through security, and you get on the train, and you put your bags underneath. And so it's pretty straightforward.
They're all connected with the EU, right? So I mean, it's pretty much you get into one of the countries and you can get into pretty much any of them, right?
Yeah, but by and large, that tends to be the case. In fact, a funny story: when I was going to London by way of the Channel, we took the train from. It was my wife and who was pregnant at the time. We found out basically a week before we went on this trip. And then our two older children were with us, and we get to the. So we took the train from Germany to Belgium. We spent a couple nights in Brussels, and then when we were leaving to head to London, we go through. You go through customs, and they check our passport, and they said, "Where's your stamp for Belgium? How'd you get into Belgium?" I'm like, "Well, we came from Germany." And they're like, "Well, where's your stamp for Germany?" And I was in the military at that time.
Right.
And so I was there with the military. And so when I came into Germany, it was my ID card that was used.
Right.
So we didn't have stamps in our passport.
Right, because you're under international law or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we showed. We explained that to him, and he understood that. But then he's like, "Well, what about Belgium?" And I was sitting there looking at this gentleman, and I was so confused because I'm like, that there's not a border there, right? Like this, you just go through. Like, who's gonna stamp my passport? And I think
we're not trying to get into Belgium. We're trying to get into here.
Right. And so I think to some degree, he was kind of just just messing with us a little bit, probably for his own enjoyment. So I literally, I didn't know what to say, and I just kind of looked at him as he's asking these questions for a while, and then he's like, "Welcome to England." And so,
you know what though?
Your pregnant wife and 2 kids. You're clearly not a threat.
you know what though? I mean, yeah, he could have been messing with you, but also, one thing you have to be vigilant about being in Europe is there's always that terrorist threat. Yeah. And if you didn't get your stamps where you're supposed to, that might have set up a red flag to scrutinize it a little more, depending on where you were coming in from. I mean, you don't look like the typical terrorist type, but then if you stereotype a certain type of people and go, "Oh, that looks like a terrorist," then you're going to miss other people that could be a potential threat. So I think there are checks and balances in place that they have to kind of use for a protocol, so that people aren't like rushing in, and they're not actually taking the time to check on them.
I agree completely, and I would even go another step further and to say that you don't know who a terrorist could be, and that it could that you have a responsibility to be vigilant, especially if your job is security, border security, or any type of law enforcement type of a field. You have a definite responsibility to protect against threats. So the scrutinization, I personally don't have any issue with. It was just more of kind of a funny experience, because it was the first and actually the only time in my traveling through Europe and the difference here was that we were going from Europe, the mainland Europe, to England.
Yeah.
And even though England was at the time a part of the EU, they still operated very differently from the EU.
Yeah. Well,
So-
England's always been.
Well, they don't
England's
they don't use the euro either. They still use their British pound.
Well, I mean,
even though
they're
when the rest of Europe was using the euro.
yeah. I mean, but England's always wanted to remain independent from everybody else.
They're
It
getting
seems
their
like,
wish.
but yeah, I mean, Brexit's in effect, so I mean, there's less for them to do.
There's a number of countries around the world that have wanted to remain independent from England. I can think of a couple at least.
Yeah, well, I know.
Yeah. Who would that be?
I can't believe the date 1776 comes to mind. That's interesting.
Probably why the Queen's mad that Harry's marrying that American girl.
Yeah, it probably is. There's still.
She's holding a grudge.
Well, but was King George, was he the same family as Elizabeth II?
Yeah.
They're still the same family. Is it still the same family from then?
Yeah,
Is it still the same royal family?
He left. Well, Edward left. It was his older brother that was going to be the monarch.
No. I'm saying that in American independence, King George.
Oh, who was the king? I mean, during the Revolution. Not
I'm talking.
times.
No. I'm not talking recent.
Okay.
I'm talking
King
George.
King George.
Yeah. So there's King George. Is that the same royalty family traced to? Because I thought it was a royalty shift in the 1800s.
I actually don't know. Honestly, my wife could probably tell you. She's English, and she's really.
I think they're still part of the House of Windsor. We have some English blood in us too.
Is this?
Right.
But I think it's still part of the House.
It's part of the House of
Because
Windsor.
their last name is Mountbatten. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Huh.
It could have been a shift.
It could have been
possible.
a shift.
I mean, you got to think about it. They married just for peace treaties and things like that. They married off different royalties of different countries. Yeah. So I mean, there could be some crossover.
There could be. Yeah. I'm just. My mind tends to wander. So, but no, it's interesting. Yeah, I've had similar issues. It was funny. My mom when she was pregnant with my youngest brother, she got stopped in France, and they were boarding the flight, and my mom's like, I don't know, 7.5, 8 months pregnant, and they're thinking that she's gonna pop, and so the gate agent goes, no, we need you to see the doctor, and she's like, I'm from the United States, like I've been over here for 2 weeks, you know, like you can see my passport, like, and so this was back in the 90s, 97, I think, and it was funny because she went to the doctor never touched her, you know, and doctor just asked her a couple of questions, and she was like, have you ever been in labor on a plane? No. You ever have you had any contractions? No. And, you know, have you ever had a premature birth? Well, one of my sons was born 2 days early. It's like the doctor's like, you're fine, just go. You know, it was really funny.
She got her official stamp.
Yeah, she got her stamp. But it was funny because I was coming home from what was that coming? Yeah, I was coming home from England. That was like the first time I visited England. I've been to England, I think 4 times, and then I've been to Sweden, and I actually got to see the airport of Denmark. I got to see Copenhagen for like 2 seconds before we got right on the plane to get to Sweden, because my uncle worked for a car company out there that's no longer in existence.
Oh.
I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Stockholm was where we were in Sweden. That was very beautiful, and I got to see what they call Coca-Cola River, which is. It looks like a river made of Coca-Cola, but it's just a river. It's because it's a reflection. Yeah, they were explaining that it's a reflection of the rocks. But you just get a scoop of water, it's perfectly clear.
Oh wow!
But like it's just the reflection of the rocks make it look like Coca-Cola.
Wow.
But anyway, and that was really interesting. The Sweden trip was very interesting because we were coming. There didn't snow the entire time. We were there for 2 weeks. Didn't snow the entire time. And then the last day, we're on our way to the airport, and it starts snowing. And we get stuck in Stockholm for 5 hours because I had to de-ice the plane twice.
You didn't develop Stockholm syndrome, did you?
No, I don't think I did. I wasn't privy to that yet. But I really enjoyed Sweden. But like it's funny because one of my favorite parts about Sweden is that. Not necessarily the countryside, because it's a beautiful country, but one of my favorite parts was the people, because that was when Warheads, the candy, came out.
Oh yeah,
and they hadn't had them yet. So we brought a bag of Warheads with us, and like it's so funny because like the first time you eat a Warhead, you have the exact same expression that's on the bag.
Yeah.
It's so funny because we went to the international school that my cousin was going to, and we were trying to convince them. You were trying to we passed them out to all the kids. It's just so funny. You know,
she
watching them all. Created a war. Yeah. That's why Sweden.
Incident.
That's why Sweden doesn't like us anymore. It's because we brought warheads over there. What parts of England have you been to? Because
So I've been to not as many parts as I would like. I've been to London.
Okay.
Twice. I've been to Stonehenge, which is still to this day my favorite destination.
Is it eerie? Is Stonehenge eerie?
It is. You know, Stonehenge was very. I don't even know how to describe it. It was very humbling, because you know you find out about what it took to. I mean, of course, there's a bunch of theories. There's theories that aliens put it there, but if you go
the most logical,
right? I'm certain that
and after
believes that's the source.
Of course, that's what happened. When we went to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, that was pretty spooky,
right?
And remember in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the alien ships met there, and seeing that sun going down right by a Devil's Tower is like, ooh.
Oh.
But I got a quick question about Stonehenge. So they got them all set up after Chevy Chase backed into them.
Yeah, they set them back up.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's an interesting story. So they talk about. I mean, it's ancient, and and they talk about basically the stone that's at Stonehenge is only really found on the coast of Wales. And so in order for it to get to Stonehenge, it was basically dragged, I can't remember the distance, 200, 300 miles, and then set up at this particular location for some reason, which I think a lot of the theology on it is that it was a temple for worship. so forth. But then the question remains, like, what was it with this specific location in the middle of this field? It's very interesting. It's I really I just really felt, humbled and amazed by it, and so it was a really good experience. And they've been to Portsmouth.
Stonehenge is Druid culture, right? Is it
Yes.
Druid culture? Yeah.
Yes.
I find I have not been privy to Stonehenge. I've been to London several times, and then I've been to Manchester, and then mostly Northern Ireland as well.
Very nice.
The Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland border. Castle. There's a castle. Dunluce Castle.
Okay.
Have you been to Dunluce?
No, I've actually
We have family
United-
in Londonderry, Northern Ireland. That's where that's where your grandfather.
Yeah.
I've actually only been to England in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
So that's a future trip.
Yeah,
for sure.
Northern Ireland's great. Ireland itself is pretty great. But Stonehenge, I'd very much like to visit Stonehenge. It'd be interesting to see.
It's fantastic.
But Dunluce is another one of those interesting places to visit because it's a very, very old castle that's built onto a cliffside, and it was meant to be a lookout castle for incoming ships because it was it's more northern part of Ireland, so it's meant to be the lookout castle for defense for the Navy, and of what Navy they had. It was in defense against the Vikings as well. It's very interesting because you go there and they have all the different layouts of, because it's a ruin, and they have the different layouts and they kind of show you where it was, and then you go to this thing and there's this door, this open doorway, and then there's a giant fence. And then there's just a corner. And so on the caption on the fence, it says, "This is where the kitchen used to be." And then you look over the fence and there's the cliffside. So every time, because I think we've been there twice, and I went when I was a little kid, and then I went when I was a teenager. And when I was a teenager, I remember it better. But I was like, when I was a teenager, I'd gotten really into paintball, and so I was like, man, this would be a great location to play paintball. And one of the guys that works there, he says, no, it wouldn't. But it was funny, but it's interesting because my dad and I were joking about that afterwards, and I was like, could you imagine if you were like flipping flapjacks and all of a sudden, just started crashing in? But apparently the castle had been abandoned by then before.
Oh, okay.
Before the kitchen fell. But Dunluce is really interesting, and then I've been to. But I'm sure in London you've been to all the major locations in London, Tower of London, and
I think
Castle Bridge.
I think I've hit most of the main tourist attractions in London. I love London. It was the people were great.
I really like London.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Because that was also the first time I had been like to the tourist part of New York City that same trip, because we went because my parents had bought tickets from Newark. To Belfast, because there's a flight there was a flight there direct.
Okay.
And so my parents bought direct tickets, and so we flew standby to Newark, and so we got there like 2 days early because we didn't want to miss the flight.
Right.
And so my parents were like, well, let's just hit up New York while we're at it. And so we went from the hotel, got the subway, and then there's the 9/11 memorial, and it was like I want to say it was like 7 years after 9/11 happened or something. And so it couldn't be that long. It's like 5 years after 9/11 happened. So they were building up the new World Trade Center, and then they also had the memorial just down the street of the old statue that used to stand in front of it, and that was very. I don't know if you've been to that. Have you been to that yet?
I have.
Oh man, that is a sight. You're like. I want to punch the crap out of somebody, after seeing something like that, and it makes you very humble to be an American, honestly. Like
Absolutely.
when I visited that, but I know we're getting all over the place with different locations, but London, I like London better than I like New York, because you go to New York, it's just loud. Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's loud all the time. and you go to London, and it's very similar style city, but it's just quiet.
Right.
You know, and there's a huge difference in the two.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. As I definitely notice the difference. I love New York City. I think that kind of like what you were saying is like New York City is a very, very patriotic city. It's very much of an American city, and there's so much American history there predating our country.
Yeah.
And so it's
our ancestors from the Netherlands did the deal to get Manhattan from the Indians,
right,
and form Brooklyn.
Right. Brooklyn back then. Brooklyn. But yeah, so I love New York City. But to that end, I think that visiting London is such an enjoyable experience because of, and also I also have to throw some props to Canada with this too, because Toronto is very much the same way as well. And London, but going back to London for a second, one of the things that I absolutely love about London, and there's not many cities, there's a few out there, but there's not many cities that do it quite as well, but they combine contemporary architecture right in with historical architecture, and
they do.
It's amazing just the way that it really kind of captures the past and the present, and even to some degree the future, with some of their buildings being so, forwardly designed.
Because like Wimbledon is in a very historic part of town.
Absolutely.
And
I've been to Wimbledon.
The Wimbledon's it's in a very historic part of town, because you go there and you're shocked. Just like this is like a different part of London.
And plus it's
but it still feels like London.
Absolutely.
They got this huge golf course that's right next to it too, a big country club.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Like London is very interesting. It's very dynamic on how it works, because in New York you've got all different cultures that are culminating in a single city, whereas in London you've got all different parts of history that are culminating in a single city. I mean, you got cultures and stuff too there, but it's just I definitely agree with you. You go to different parts of London and you're like you're shocked that like and it's crazy, because you go to Tower of London and you see like very, 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 castle age type architecture, and then you turn around
right in downtown.
Yeah, and right in downtown, and then you turn around and there's Victorian architecture with the Tower Bridge. Like. And
then you look across the river and you see I can't remember the
building,
Eye, but the
Eye,
the London Eye, but also they have the glass
MI6.
Yeah, I think it's the MI6 building.
Yeah.
And that's, that to me is what I picture buildings looking like 100 years from now.
Yeah.
Just very, elegantly designed, very beautifully crafted.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing. It's amazing. Actually, a funny story about London. When my wife and I were planning our trip, the one that we got caught up in Belgium on.
Yeah.
We were looking at the days, and what it ended up coming down to is that we were going to have 4 nights in one city. We were going to a number of places. We went to Cologne, Germany, and we went to Brussels, Belgium, and then we went to London, we went to Stonehenge, Portsmouth, the beaches of Normandy, Paris, and then back to Germany. And but for London and Paris, we had 4 nights in one of those one city and 3 nights in the other. And I had always wanted to go to London, so I wanted 4 nights in London. And she grew up, I think, like probably a lot of women, wanting to go to Paris. It's the romance capital of the world and everything. And so she really wanted to go to Paris. And so at the end of the day, like a good husband, I conceded to her.
Right.
We did 3 nights in London, 4 nights in Paris. She absolutely loved London. We get to Paris. She was less than impressed. It was just not exactly what she had hoped.
And your mother had the same reaction when she went to Paris.
That's interesting, because I hear that from a lot of people. Is that like Paris? people, particularly women, build it up in their heads
Exactly.
of what Paris is supposed to be.
Right.
And it's supposed to be this romantic, like,
Right.
just sprawled out in front of you romance all the time, and it's just not.
I've
like,
never
it's
been
not.
there myself, but I think it'd be neat to see the lights at night or something. But
I mean,
It's
but
a
it's a
beautiful
dirty city. It's a dirty city.
It's a beautiful city.
And some parts are pretty bad, though, aren't they?
But there are some dicey areas, which is the case anywhere.
That's
anywhere
true.
in the world. For me, it came down to my personal experiences with people in each of the locations, and so and I specifically emphasize my personal experience because I'm not categorizing the whole population. By
Right,
means.
right.
But in London there was not. I haven't met many nicer people than the people I met in London.
London, yeah.
Super helpful, super friendly. Just really, they seemed really interested in speaking to you. In Paris, my experience was drastically different. Everything from trying to be swindled by a number of people to my wife and I being told that we were bad parents by these two French women because we took our child out to dinner. So our children
What?
out to dinner.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Is it
Almost
so?
everybody
Is
I
it
know that's
the
gone here, so they've gotten mugged at the train station.
so? Is it the stereotypical French arrogance that you think it is, or is it just?
I want to call it French arrogance because I think they would respond with American arrogance.
Well, it's American pride, goddammit.
Yeah, but you know what? French school children are taught English at an early age, but they don't use it. They know, like if you're talking to them, most school kids, as they grow older, can't understand English, but they won't respond to you.
Yeah.
Like they don't know what you're saying to them.
What I think it attributes to is, we tend to they have their cultural and social norms, and we have ours. For example, the issue with the kids, right, is so the backstory behind that is that culturally, if you have young children, and we found this pretty consistent throughout Europe, but particularly in France and in a major city in France. Is that you don't see many children out in the evening time for dinners and everything. You just don't see it. It's just that's not their culture. The idea is that you're inside at that hour and you're not out doing things.
Right.
And I think probably to some degree, with the exception of tourists, but we didn't see that much. We didn't see many young children out. And so then when we're sitting outside we went to dinner and we intentionally sat outside. It was us and these two ladies that were outside. When our youngest got a little bit fussy, they rather than saying, "Hey, can you keep the baby quiet?"
Yeah.
Their response was, is basically, "You guys are terrible parents. You should be in your hotel right now with the children." And so, and that's not a referendum on Parisians by any means, but that's my experience. And so when you look at it from a branding perspective, is my experience in Paris is not one that I would necessarily immediately recommend to someone.
Right.
So if someone were to ask me, would you want to go to London or should I go to Paris? I'd probably ask a couple exploratory questions, and then depending on what they say and their perspective, I'll never discourage anyone from traveling and seeing new cultures and experiencing new things. But I would certainly give a more glowing review of London than I would of Paris based on my experience. Now, I do look forward to getting back to Paris and taking another opportunity to have a better experience. And I think that's going to probably happen in the near future, as it seems that I may actually have part of my family is going to be living in Paris soon.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to experience that again. But at this point in time, that's one of the side effects of not treating everyone with respect and kindness is the fact that now that's my perception
of Paris itself.
Paris.
Well, that's the thing I noticed with like I went to the second largest city, which is Marseille, and the people were rude there too, in the big city.
Right.
But I've noticed I went to school and lived in a small village in Italy, and I went to school and I lived in a small village in France, and it's like night and day.
Right.
Those people in those small villages are actually friendly, and they'll talk to you, and they give you a good feeling like you're welcome in their country. But when you get to those big cities, it's like the whole different culture. But I will say, when I was in Milan, the people there were actually pretty friendly, even though it was a big city.
Right.
They were friendly. But there's something about the culture in France in the bigger cities. It's just, I don't know. It's just they're snooty.
I find that also in common with a lot of American cities too, because you get in parts of San Francisco and London, not London, but some parts of San Francisco, L.A., New York, even parts of what's really bad. I forget what city it's really bad in, but Chicago. You know, you get into parts of those cities, and some people can be really nasty to you.
Right.
You know, and then you get into more rural suburban type areas, and you find people are very friendly. You know, and I've always, you know, like I spent my time last week. I spent my time in Fort Myers, Naples area, and it was great. It was great. I had a great experience. I mean, the beach is right there, and you know, people are very friendly. I mean, the average age is, you know, twice my age. It's just like 56. You know, like the average population there. But you know, I mean,
and that's going to fluctuate when the winter comes. You're going to get a third of the snowbirds coming in.
Oh yeah, well no, half their population is snowbirds, and that's like
it's gone up then, because
when I
was
it's
down
like
there, my
December.
cousin was telling me it was a third.
Yeah, it's like December to May is the snowbird season.
Well, it's increased now.
So,
Wow.
Since I was there.
but no, it's interesting because you know you deal with. I had a very small town laid back experience going to Fort Myers, and
That's good.
and versus you go to a place like New York or LA, and you don't get that very friendly experience. And my wife when she moved from San Francisco to here, because San Francisco is a very dense population, and so when you bump into somebody in the grocery store over there, they give you a mean look.
Right.
You know, even if it's not your fault, they give you a mean look. And here, even if it's not your fault, even if it's your fault, they apologize to you here.
Right.
You know, in the Houston area, not here, but
Right.
in the Houston area.
And the one thing I to kind of add on to what you're saying, and what QuicKarl was saying, is that I'm glad you mentioned the French countryside, because my experience in the French countryside was fantastic as well, especially near like the beaches in Normandy. Very, very friendly, very nice. But I look at it as from the city perspective versus the country perspective. A rural perspective is I look at it as a mathematical equation, right? Is in cities, people tend to be tends to be a much busier, active culture. So because of that, they don't tend to engage directly as much, and that could be a time matter. That could be just don't want to worry about anyone else's. And so when you talk about population density, I think you have a higher chance of interacting with someone that just has, a bad personality, we'll say,
right?
Because of the fact that person, it's advantageous to them to promote their personality to engage with you and give you a bad experience. Right. And so then when you factor in the numbers, there's just a much denser amount.
Right. Well, but I mean, I got a theory on population density as well. I mean, it's not my theory alone, but I read a study about rats that you start enclosing rats similar to the way you enclose people in apartment complexes, and the more people you shove in there, the more rats you shove in a single area, the more likely they are to be hostile to each other, is because they have less space. And so my theory is that the more dense population you have, the smaller your personal bubble is. And so with countryside, your personal bubble can be almost as big as you want because your neighbor is 2 miles down the road. Right. You know, right. with you know, a dense population, your neighbor is 10 feet from you. So right. You know, you've got to deal with that. And so that's
what's interesting though, what you're saying. Like Tyler and I, we lived in New Jersey. And it's the most densely populated state in the United States for size. Yeah. But yet, where we were at, there was a lot of countryside and farms. So it seemed like it was really spread out. But then when you started getting into the more metro areas, like northern New Jersey and closer to Philadelphia, it was dense there. Yes. But I think you can have a real dense area, but you're not like picking every spot. You're not filling it with people. So there are areas that aren't like that. But with your rats thing, I understand what you're talking about. Everybody's crammed into the thing, and they don't have the space to go anywhere.
Well, and there are the problem with a theory is that there are exceptions that define the rules, because there's a reason a theory is not law. Law is that it applies every time. Theory is it doesn't apply every time.
Right. And it's like the old adage of, you know, good fences make good neighbors.
Yes.
It's the exact same concept. A lot of people, I think, misinterpret that sometimes, but the reality is that, you know, you need to have your space, and when you are in a more dense area where you know, your specific space and kind of bubble from the rest of the road gets drastically reduced, I think it's inherent that that's going to impact your personality.
Right, yeah, of course.
Of course. It could impact it. Well, it's going to impact it no matter what, but here's an example, too. If you're all crammed in there, it'll impact it. Like, let's say we're all neighbors, and we all get along great. So my attitude in that camp space is like, well, I like living here because the people around me are cool and I'm okay. But you could be in that same cramped space and hate your neighbors, and there's a lot of crime or something going on around there. Yeah. Your attitude is going to be completely different, but you're still in the same type of space.
Well, but it's interesting, even in our apartment complex. Like, Amy doesn't like being on the west side of our apartment complex because there's a bunch of shady people over there, you know, and you know, the people that used to live there were fine, but the people that live there now, she doesn't like them, you know. And it's interesting that just one person, you know, she's got a bad experience with that one person, and you know, that throws off that she doesn't want to be over there on that side, you know. And that's not to say that everybody that lives on that side of the apartment complex she doesn't like, but you know, that's the person that she has an interaction with, and that's the person that lives on the first floor, you know. And I find population's interesting, but getting back to our more travel-oriented thing, I mean, London's pretty. I like London. I definitely agree with you there. There's a lot of American tourist attractions that I really like as well. The Grand Canyon. Have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I have.
It's wonderful. Grand Canyon is wonderful.
That was one of my road trips.
Yes, it was.
Mrs. Lotus has not been to the Grand Canyon, so I'm very interested to take her, although it may be more difficult in the near future to do so.
A chance they might do, and it would be closer, but still a ways, is to take her up to the Badlands in South Dakota.
Okay.
It's smaller than the Grand Canyon, but I think it's prettier. And and it's easier to drive around in.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same effect as the Grand Canyon.
Yeah,
but it'd be a lot closer for you.
Yeah, I like the Grand Canyon. As a kid, I had a really good experience because my parents bought the first time we did a major road trip, they rented a pop-up. And we did Colorado. We hit up most of the Colorado. We hit up Durango Silverton. We did the Durango Silverton Railway, which is really fun. And then we did Mesa Verde, and there was one other one. Four Corners. We did Four Corners, and then we did the Great Sands in New Mexico, the White Sands in New Mexico.
Oh, yeah, White Sands.
Yeah, White Sands. That was really cool. It was very Star Wars, like Tatooine type feel to it.
They did a lot of missile testing down there in White Sands.
Yeah.
I think there's a base there, White Sands Missile Range.
Yeah. But then my parents bought a pop-up because they liked it so much, and so they still have that pop-up, and it's still in really good condition. But they bought a pop-up, and we did the next major trip we did was to the Grand Canyon, and we ended up going to California as well. And my grandparents live in outside LA.
Oh, okay.
And so I like where my grandparents used to live. They don't live there anymore because they're a senior living home now. But where they used to live, they had a view over the canyon, over the LA Canyon. It was really good. And their house sold so quick. It was so expensive, but it sold so quick. I really enjoyed their house, and I really enjoyed Burbank, and I really enjoyed some parts of LA. I know that LA has gone downhill very quickly as far as the people and population and things that go on down there, but there's still parts of LA that I find very beautiful, and Santa Monica Pier is really cool.
I was going to say that Santa Monica Pier.
Yeah, Santa Monica Pier. I really enjoy.
I like LA. My biggest issue with LA is the fact that it's such a sprawling city.
Yeah,
that was one of the things that I went to LA well before I went to New York City, and so I kind of expected New York City to be like LA because in a lot of ways, at least commerce related, those two are the core or the pillar cities for the United States as far as commerce goes, and so I kind of expect them to be the same, but they are completely opposite.
They are wildly different, yes.
Yeah, completely different. And so I think after experiencing New York and seeing how much can be, kind of goes against the whole population density, but how much can be put into such a small area and so accessible and so easy to navigate. And then LA is so sprawling and everything, much more difficult to navigate. You can't. I'm sure people have, but you can't memorize LA. You can memorize New York.
Yeah. Well, the problem you ran into there is LA can expand. They can go east.
Right. Exactly. New York.
New York can't. It's got rivers on both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have to make do with what they have.
New York can only go up, can't go.
Well, and it's even pretty restricted going up too, because the terrain when you go up Manhattan Island, at the end of it you're hitting the I can't remember the mountain range now, but it's
no, I meant up vertical.
Oh yeah,
up
exactly.
vertical.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can only go up vertical.
Absolutely.
Not up north.
Yeah, up in the Catskills.
Yes, Catskills.
Okay.
Yeah. New York.
But yes, you're correct.
I've not been to every single part of New York, and I haven't even been to the Statue of Liberty. I've seen it, but I've not been to it. Because we did the Long Island Ferry, that passes by by.
Did you go over to Ellis Island?
Ellis Island, no.
Oh, that's
Ellis
definitely
Island,
worth it.
Yeah, Ellis Island is pretty worth it. But we did the Long Island Ferry. We did it there and back because it passes the doesn't pass by the Statue of Liberty going there, but it passes by it going back. And so we did the Long Island Ferry both ways because it goes right by.
Absolutely.
And you get when you hit the Statue of Liberty. It's that very American pride feel to it.
It's probably around the world the most recognizable image of the United States next to the American flag.
Yeah, of course.
A gift from France.
Right.
How ironic.
Which in Paris they actually have a much smaller model of the Statue of Liberty.
And it's just it's so funny. There's a comedian I listen to that was talking about gifts that we get from France nowadays, and the most recent gift was a tree.
Oh, yeah.
It's really.
Oh, yeah, at the White House.
You're really stepping your game up there, Paris. In
And
France.
they're missing that tree. The media was all over it. The tree went missing. They thought it got stolen, and they said they had to take it out of the ground and put it in quarantine for several weeks because it came from France.
Yeah.
So
It's so funny.
I am a former United States Marine, so I found the tree to be a very, very nice gesture from France because the history of the tree is it's from Belleau Wood in France, and if you're not familiar with the history of Belleau Wood with the Marines. When the Marines were fighting at Belleau Wood, afterwards, after the battle was won, the army was interrogating one of the German officers, and they said, "Hey, what do you think of the Marines at Belleau Wood?" And he said that they fought like Teufelhunden, which is devil dogs in German. Yeah. And then, of course, that's been an adopted nickname of Marines since then. Yeah, Teufelhunden. I have it tattooed on my back.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to me, like the tree, it is funny contextually, but
for the average American that doesn't know that context,
right, exactly.
like I still think it's good. I still think it's good that countries get along. That countries that are allies, they need to get along. And I also appreciate the gesture of the tree, but I don't know, like you said, I don't know the context, know, and so.
And I didn't really see anywhere where it was.
And you know what?
Really,
most
I don't think it was
know that context.
And most people, yeah, you're right, and most people aren't. And I didn't find it particularly disrespectful. It just seemed to not have the same oomph as the Statue of Liberty, you know, but You win some, you lose some, But that's a piece of information that's very interesting.
Maybe when the president from Japan comes over, they'll plant a bonsai tree.
Maybe
possible.
But so what about Latin America? What countries in Latin America have you visited? Which ones of those do you like?
So I've visited probably. Between Latin America and the Caribbean, I think I've been to maybe 8 or 9 countries.
8 or 9.
As I mentioned earlier, I really enjoyed Colombia.
Okay.
Colombia is beautiful. I was in Bogota. I'm looking forward to in the future visiting other parts of Colombia, which I hear are, even better. But what I really loved about Bogota is, of course, there's a tremendous amount of history in Colombia, South American history with the Bolivars and also with it kind of being the gateway point of South America.
Right.
Panama used to actually be part of Colombia before they separated. But Colombia is very interesting, and Bogota is so beautiful. And it sits at about 8,000 feet in altitude. It was funny when I first got there. I went walking around the city to go see some of the historic stuff. It was early in the morning, so I'm walking around the city. I'm going up some hills and everything, and I was getting winded, and really winded. And I'm like, I know that I am not this out of shape. This is crazy.
Right.
So then a little bit later, I'm talking to a guy, and he goes, "Oh, how you feeling with the altitude?" I'm like, "What altitude?" Because I just assumed, and stupid of me for someone who travels frequently, I just assumed that like Bogota was probably at a normal altitude.
Right.
It's going to be warm climate. I was cold. That should have been the first indicator. And the second one, so when he's like, how you feeling with the altitude? I'm like, what's the altitude here? And he's like, it's about 8,000 feet.
Yeah, it's like over a mile in the air.
That's like a mile and a half taller than Denver.
Yeah.
Denver's a mile high. That's a mile and a half. So. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so my eyes probably got like
Real
huge.
big, yeah.
And I was like, well, that explains it.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting, but because of its altitude, it sits amongst the mountains, right? They look like hills that are above you, but they're full mountains. It's just that you elevated up as well. And so there was this monastery that I went up to. You have to take this cable car. I don't like heights. I'm scared of heights. I was petrified in this cable car. And actually, the guys that were running it, they really enjoyed the American that was holding on to the pole in the middle of the cable car, shaking. So much so that halfway up, they were kind enough to stop it and open up the door a little bit to give me some air.
Some air, yeah.
To help
That was awful nice.
That's very helpful.
It was incredibly helpful.
That's fresh air.
Yeah,
fresh breeze.
It was wonderful. So that was traumatic. But you get up to this monastery, and it's the monastery is very nice. It's really historical and everything. But the best part about it is the view. You turn around and you look out, and you can look out over all of Bogota and even into the mountains behind and around Bogota, and you really get an appreciation. Like at that moment, you feel like you're on top of the world. There's a substantial amount of places that are higher altitude, but in that particular region, in that area, you feel like you're at the highest point.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very intrigued by some of the areas that you pointed out. I've been to Mexico. And where else have I been? In Latin America, I think that's about it. Mexico, but we did. My wife and I did a cruise to Cozumel, and then we did Progreso. And from Progreso, we visited some Mayan ruins, and that was really interesting. And the Mayans are very interesting culture. They're very. It's a lot because you see how civilization. Because when you visit a culture like the Mayans, and not that there's much Mayan culture left, but Mexico. That part of Mexico is very historically driven,
right.
And when you visit a culture like the Mayans, you can see why. There are a bunch of cultures that rise and fall, and what their value system is. And this gets more into the philosophical side of things, because the Mayan and Aztec culture is very related to the subject of death, that they worship death, and that there's still the desire to live, but to be sacrificed was an honor,
right?
Right. Whereas in our culture, the value is life,
right?
And that's why our culture still exists. That's why our culture is the way it is. That's why we've advanced so much more in the past 150 years than all of mankind has been able to do since the Dark Ages.
And did you know that sacrifice for our country, though? Yeah, we don't practice sacrificing people, but there's a lot of people that step up to be sacrificed for our nation.
Right, but I think
we're not sacrificing people to like some god or something.
No. But I think there's a huge difference between the sacrifice of duty and the sacrifice of your life.
Right. Well, sure it is.
Because your duty is to if you're a soldier in the Marines or in the Army or in the Navy, your duty is to be a soldier. Your duty is to protect your duty is to protect the Constitution.
Right.
And so I find it.
But you do that because you value life.
You do that, yes. You value the lives of your citizens, no matter whether they appreciate you doing that or not.
Right. Exactly. And I think you nailed it. Is because of the fact that because our culture does value life. It's more. It drives people to achieve and develop and advance and create in life, rather than, looking at death as the opportunity of when salvation occurs.
Right.
And so so I think that I think that you hit on a very good point that I hadn't really thought about previously, is that really it is the value of life promotes achievement and promotes,
But when you do die, you do receive salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. there is the salvation of redemption and forgiveness
right.
through,
but
depending on your...
You don't look forward to it throughout your life, right?
No, but you look forward to the salvation.
I mean, you look for... Well, that doesn't mean you can't look forward to it, but you shouldn't be trying to pursue it.
Okay.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
That's a good
because
point. You're right.
You can look forward to it, but you shouldn't be trying to pursue it. So, like, God looks down on suicide.
Right.
So that's why you should...
In my religion, it's a sin.
Well, in my religion, it's a sin, too.
Yeah.
And so God looks down on suicide. So he's not going to admit you into the pearly gates. If the last act that you've done is killing yourself, you can't kill yourself and then ask for forgiveness for that, because the deed is done. Mm-hmm. We can talk about suicide in another episode, but
if you want to.
Well, I've dealt. It's a very this episode took a very, very dark turn. But it's very interesting the way it's built. But what I found the architecture very ingenious with the Mayan culture, because my wife was at towards the bottom of the pyramid, of the Mayan pyramids, and we climbed all the way to the top, and it's a steep climb. Like it does not fulfill that 18-to-1 ratio, or what is it?
It's 12 by 18.
12.
Oh,
No. The ratio is 18-to-1. So
18-to-1.
that's how a step should be measured. 18 inches total. So like if you've got is it 18 inches or 9 inches? I forget, is it 9?
I think as an average step is the face of it is 7.5, and then you have 1.5 inches of the actual platform of it.
So I mean, like it's a huge steps. Like all the Mayan steps are huge. They're just not built the same way. And I found out later that, and also every step is tilted by a degree and a half.
Exactly.
And I found out later that that's because of sacrifices, so that they would do a sacrifice so that the blood would all run down the steps. And the reason that the Mayan pyramids used to be red is because there was so much blood from all the sacrifices that they never cleaned it up, so that it would permanently stain the pyramids. But anyway, I found it very ingenious, because the pyramid we were visiting was one of the pyramids where they gather everybody to do announcements and stuff like that, and you could stand at the top on this little proscenium platform thing, and I could talk just in a regular voice, similarly I'm talking to you, and my wife 75 feet down all the way at the bottom could hear me perfectly clear.
That's amazing.
It's just amazing.
That is.
That you could, and she could turn around, and she because there was a ramp that could go about halfway up, and like when she was all the way at the bottom, you could barely hear her, but when she got about halfway up, you could hear her pretty clearly.
Wow.
And so like she didn't want to do the steps because she's got bad ankles, and she doesn't like doing steps that much. So, and particularly steep steps like those, and plus she's also terrified of heights. She's like you, she's terrified of heights. And so you get up there, and it's like
down.
You get up there, and it's like,
hey, with those acoustics, could we do a podcast from there?
We could easily do a pod, and everybody in the world would hear us, no problem.
My kids were playing on a Mayan pyramid. I don't know, it was probably about 6 months ago, and I was horrified because of the fact that they were loving it. They thought it was like, playground. It was so much fun running up and down. But I'm looking at these jagged edges of the stairs and the way they're slanted, and so I was horrified. So sometimes, ignorance is bliss with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's something that they remember doing. But it is interesting because the steps are so big, and
yeah, it's just Mayan culture. I found it very interesting, and my wife thought it was really messed up how they play their sports. That the winning team, the captain of the winning team, would get sacrificed to the god, the god of rain, because that's how they introduced their rainy season, was they'd play a game of.
So you'd have to throw the game if you didn't want to go. If you didn't want to be sacrificed.
Yeah, if you didn't want to be sacrificed to the other game. But I mean, being sacrificed is considered an honor, a great honor.
That's when
the
first corruption started in sports betting. You threw a game because you didn't want to die.
Right. But the other was the temple pyramid. You go on the back side of the temple pyramid. It was actually a scout. It was actually like I'd say it's what a modern day equivalent of a sniper perch is.
Oh wow!
But there was like a small window, and it looked very. It was just a small window, and it was this little shape, and obviously somebody could be standing in it and look out,
mm-hmm.
but you could stand in a certain spot and then clap really hard, and it would sound exactly like a bird, a specific bird that is native to that area.
Really?
And I did some research, and because the guide that we had didn't know, but I did some research, and it turns out that the reason that they did that is so that they could warn people they could warn whoever's in the tower without him ever having to be seen.
Oh wow!
And so he was just there, and so then they would run around and clap, and so if there was invaders, they would clap really hard so that they could communicate pretty well.
Oh wow!
Of just the way it's because I mean, even though they valued sacrifice and death, they didn't value death from somebody else. I find very interesting. It's like you don't value death when it's given to you by somebody else, but mm-hmm. when your own culture is doing it to you, then you value it. It's considered an honor. So I found that very interesting.
So in context matters.
Yes, yeah, and but I mean, there's just so many cultures in the world,
mm-hmm.
and it's very interesting. Where you've been, and how many languages do you speak?
Just two.
Just two?
Yeah.
What language?
I speak Spanish and English.
Spanish and English?
I know what I consider commuter language of probably about 13 languages. But
okay.
That's just, basic words getting around and not really speaking the language at all. They're just words. They're not contextually or grammatically correct.
Just how to get somewhere where the bathroom is or something.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah. I really like. I would really like to learn another language formally. I haven't. I know enough Spanish to comprehend it. Mm-hmm. I can understand it. I can't speak it.
Right.
I had a lady at work Saturday. She's like, "What's your name?" And she said it in Spanish. And I said, "My name's James." And she goes, "Oh, you understood me?" It's like, "Yes, ma'am, I understood you." And she goes, "Oh, well, I won't talk about you in Spanish anymore." Anymore. And well, I mean, I knew she was joking, but it's just funny. I can understand. Understand Spanish.
Isn't that como se llama?
No, ¿cuál es su nombre?
What did I say?
¿Cómo se llama would work too.
Yeah, ¿cómo se llama?
Yeah, ¿cómo se llama would work as well.
Nombre is more southern Mexico.
Yeah, well, it's the formal.
Yeah,
it's the formal. So that would be the biggest thing with it. Is like I speak formal Spanish. I'm not quite as well as versed in
slang.
In the slang. And a little bit from certain areas, but primarily it's pretty formal Spanish that I speak. It was a goal of mine too, is to learn another language. I took a stab, good old college try at Spanish in high school.
Yeah.
And my teacher actually kicked me out of the second year of Spanish. The first day of school.
Your dad just had his posture change. I mean, he's trying to figure out.
Yeah. Aren't you going to talk about when you were 7th grade and you didn't even go to Spanish class? You were wandering around on the hall?
No, I was like 6th grade.
Oh, 6th grade. Excuse me.
I turned out just fine.
See, now
You're welcome.
You should be thanking me.
See, now the discipline comes. This is when he gets to discipline you.
You should be thanking me.
So you had to take Spanish to graduate my high school. You had to take a foreign language. Right?
Yeah,
and I
same
think
here.
We had 3 choices. French,
but
German,
usually
and
you need at least 2 years of a foreign language to get in a lot of colleges.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I made sure that I chose degrees that didn't have language requirements.
Yeah, I have an arts degree, so it required 2 years of a foreign language, and I ended up taking ASL.
Yeah.
Because I took ASL because I'm a what?
That's a great one.
It's a great one to learn, but it's only local to the American, to American deaf culture. But my sister-in-law, she's graduating with some sort of degree in speech therapy that's got an emphasis in ASL, which is interesting.
Wonderful.
And so she's fluent in sign language, but
what's that language? Esperanto.
Esperanza. Right? Esperanza. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some universal language.
Yeah, but I don't know. English is a pretty universal language.
I don't know how close we are to a universal language for the road. I think it's
well, I mean, the international language for I don't know if you know this, but the international language for flying for pilots is English.
Right.
And so I think that's the only, that every single tower is required to have at least two English speaking people in it at all times. So that's universal. The FAA here in the United States requires that. Mexico requires that. Right. I mean, everywhere you fly to.
The primary business language is English.
Then there's the pilots know English then from the other countries? When they fly
not
here?
every pilot is required to know English, but all the towers
so
are.
When they want to communicate, like if they come over here and they're from a different country and they don't speak English, how do they communicate then?
I don't think.
Well, no,
most
if you're a pilot that doesn't speak English, you're not allowed into a different country.
Oh.
So
if they fly into our country, they got to at least know English. They got to
know English, yeah.
Okay, but
so
they fly in another country, they might not have to have that.
Right. Okay. So but my dad will fly to Mexico, and there'll be tower communicating in Spanish, and then when they communicate with him, it's in English. I mean, I know that whenever you go to the Arabic countries, and American, because most of the time, if you're flying destinations from America, you're going to speak to somebody that speaks English, but you might hear Arabic all over the tower as well, and like my dad's expressed frustration in that they should mandate it so that no other language other than English should be permitted on the tower parade. But that I don't think that's ever going to happen because there's no way to really enforce that.
Yeah. I've noticed that in travel too that English is pretty commonly used by airlines. I mean, I've flown from foreign destination to another foreign destination with two different languages, and so when you're on the flights, they typically will, for example, Indonesia to Japan. So they do announcements in Bahasa, and then they do announcements in Japanese. But additionally, even though you're on a Japanese air carrier traveling from a Bahasa-speaking country to a Japanese-speaking country, they actually still also did English. It makes announcements take longer.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing about the English, though, and you've come across this with your Spanish, you're in different countries that speak Spanish, but they have their own dialect.
Right.
So you have to pick up stuff. We have that issue with English. If you actually spoke English like they do in England,
it's very different.
It is very different.
Well, not very different, but it's
they call
enough.
stuff different. Like the elevator could be the lift, or if you're on vacation or you're on holiday.
Yeah.
Or if you want an eraser, they call it a rubber.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying.
Well, and if you say rubber here, it's completely different.
Yeah, it is. but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's still a different dialect, and even
there's colloquialisms to every.
Right. So if you're speaking English, you want to make sure you're on the same page, even though you all speak English, and even if you go in different parts of this country, like you come down here and it's y'all. Yeah. That's a word now down here, but in other places it's you all, but not y'all.
Y'all.
Listen, I'm from Colorado and I've used y'all my whole life.
Y'all.
So.
Yeah, there you are.
I ain't got no.
Our howdy partner.
It's funny because you say get.
Oh yeah.
There's get.
Oh
there's
yeah,
right.
Get. And also,
what's funny
is my cousin Vinny when he said the two Utes, and the judge goes, "What's a Ute?"
In Spanish they have a y'all version. In Spanish, the ustedes article in Spanish is
Formal.
like saying y'all.
ustedes?
Well, usted is formal. Ustedes is formal too, but so like if I'm speaking about you guys, it would be the ellos form or the ustedes form, which is basically you two, right? So then, like, say I was going to say to be, which would be a star, I would say están because of the fact that I'm going to use the conjugation for both of you.
Right.
So I don't have to say you guys are to be. I can just say están and capture it all. But there's also with that ustedes, which is the same, but it's I would say like ustedes están, and that's like saying y'all are gonna be. This is what it's essentially.
Yeah. Can you write that down?
But it's funny.
That's your Spanish lesson for
today. Yeah.
The year.
And I still remember that from high school when I took Spanish. But no, it's because get and because I have an arts degree in theater, right. And my my theater professor, was one of my favorite theater professors in college. We did a show that takes place in upstate New York, and there's a guy that was on the show, and he managed to get rid of his southern accent for the show. But the one thing that threw it off was that he would constantly say "get" instead of "get." Mm-hmm. And get is a southern thing. It's not a northern thing. Right. And so we're coming down to like a week before previews, getting ready and go into technical rehearsals. Mm-hmm. And this is our last technical rehearsal before we do the previews. And our last technical rehearsal, he goes, I'm going to get going. And my professor goes, Stop the show. So there's this giant music cue, there's this giant lighting cue, and that was like the trigger for it. And she stops the show, like everything comes on, and she walks up and she just about slaps him in the face, and she goes, "You're in New York. It's get, not get." It's just so funny. We're just stopping the show. But so I mean, we're getting up to we're getting almost to an hour and a half here, but
we're getting to
it. So I don't know if you wanted to explore more, or if you wanted to come back on the show and do some more later.
I can come back. I can come back sometime.
We're going to be long distance anyway, so we can just bring everybody in.
But we can do. I guess we can do journeys next time, and we can do because we did destinations today.
Or maybe the hassles of getting from point A to point B.
Right.
Yeah, right. I think that'd be a good topic for you to come. I'd love for you to come back. I don't know if your dad would like you to come back, but
I guess
I'd love for you to come back on the show.
I never cared what he's thought in the past.
Yeah,
anyways.
well, clearly the review that you gave us for the last episode, clearly you don't care.
Yeah.
But it's great to have you on the show. I mean, all these destinations you talk about, I really appreciate. I mean, it makes me want to go out and travel some more. But
that's good.
And I hope our listeners definitely want to explore some of the areas.
How many listeners are we up to?
I think we're up to 20 or 30 or so.
That's good.
I mean, our data cap, we're not hitting our data cap, but we're using almost a quarter of it, which is good.
I feel very strongly about travel. We are very rapidly moving towards a globalized economy.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more important that people experience other cultures and other places, and if nothing else, just for contextual purposes.
And we can end with more of a philosophical conundrum. I find that very interesting because with technology and us able to communicate from across the world in a matter of seconds,
right?
The need to there's a lot of people that don't feel they need to learn other cultures because you because you're able to access anyone from anywhere almost at any point and any time.
Exactly.
The way the technologies go with advancements in phone technology, Skype, FaceTime. Google Talk is really convenient now. And it's very interesting to that you say there is a need for travel to exist, and because it kind of cuts against the grain of the goal, not the goals of technology, but it cuts against that grain that you still need to understand the context in which somebody is talking to you.
Exactly.
And I find that's very good.
I've heard, not to drag it on, but I've heard a number of people in conversation say, well, I don't need to go to this place because it will cost me X number amount of dollars, and I can just Google it, and I can learn everything I want to know about it. I can see it. I can see pictures. I can see videos. I can read travel blogs, and it's all true. It's absolutely true. You can do that, but I can tell you, there's a big difference in experience in seeing pictures and watching a video of someone riding on the Amazon River and actually getting on a boat and riding down the Amazon River.
Yeah.
It's substantially different, and what it impacts.
Plus, you can only see what they show you. You can't look 360 degrees around.
I definitely agree that the experience is often more valuable than the learned idea.
Absolutely.
But I can also understand too that people can't afford to travel all the time.
Definitely.
But I think that's where technology comes in, is a good use. Is a good use of technology is the people that cannot afford that.
Right.
They're able to still experience it to somewhat, because you can
maybe
still
they're
look at.
handicapped.
But
they
I mean,
have the money, but they can't travel physically.
But I mean, just to give you an example, in our lifetime, we will never visit the stars.
Right.
It will never happen in our lifetime, but we're still able
I've seen
to
some stars.
visit the stars, like physically go and experience.
He doesn't mean you stalking the movie stars,
Like Michelle Pfeiffer.
He's talking about the actual.
I'm talking
about the
solar systems, galaxies.
Yeah, not you hanging out at Tom Cruise's
It's amazing
house.
that I have to. It's amazing
saw Tom
that.
Cruise in New Orleans.
I did.
Did you? It's amazing that I have to clarify to you exactly what's happening
Not
here.
really.
But
I'm used to it.
I've spent too much
wants to
time.
have a- he
That's
wants to have a podcast.
That's why I'm moving, is because I don't want to experience this
He
anymore.
wants to do a podcast on all the stuff that I
understand.
don't understand.
Yes.
Or I misunderstand.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I've gone around the road a couple of times trying to get away from this.
Yeah. Well,
It's like a bad,
is this?
What was it you used to tell
You know
me?
what that
it's
works?
like a bad penny that never goes away, or something.
You know what?
to that effect.
That road works both ways.
Yeah, I know. My whole life I heard, you're like a bad penny, you just keep coming back. or
Just
something.
keep coming back.
Which I never understood, because
And I gave him a bill when he left, but I'm still waiting for the check.
That's funny. I mean, we will never visit the stars, but it's still interesting that we can go online and we can see a picture of the Hubble telescope looking at a black part of space, and you see millions of galaxies.
And they're
Like,
getting ready
you
to
can
launch
still
another one.
appreciate.
Yeah.
You can still appreciate from your computer at home.
Definitely.
And I think, and I agree with you. There's a huge difference between appreciation of going and experiencing it, but the appreciation of also being able to look at it at home. But I encourage people. I definitely encourage people that can afford it. And if you're a listener that can afford to go to places like Europe, there's still lots of tourist areas that you can go to in if you're listening in America, just locally,
Right.
that you can go to,
Right.
and you can still appreciate the beauty. I mean, even in Texas, you go to parts of West Texas, once you get past the desert and you start getting in towards the more mountainous region, I mean, it's hot, but it's very beautiful.
Right.
It is very beautiful. Big Bend National Park is very, very beautiful, and it's cheap to go there, you know?
Pallador's Canyon's pretty.
Yeah, it is.
I think the biggest takeaway is do what you can and experience as much as you can.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. You got anything else for us you'd like to touch on this
Thanks
episode?
for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Glad you could come out of wherever you come from.
Yeah.
And when we do our 50th anniversary show, we might have you back on.
Yeah,
That would be good.
but
But
yeah,
sooner,
I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're able to take time out of your take time away from your family to sit down and allow me to interview you a little bit and figure out kind of what context your dad has to deal with, and give me a break from your dad. Honestly, that's really what this episode is. We all need one from time to time. He he gave me a break from my mom when it was him and my mom.
That's true. He kind of sat back.
I just kind of sat back and didn't say nothing.
Her and I went at it, just like you guys are going.
Yeah, but we'll definitely have you on again sometime. Just let us know if you want to do a Skype interview, or if you're in town again next time.
And you might be in his town.
Yeah, if you ever come to my area, you're more than welcome to stop by. We have an extra room.
And you can visit your cousin Sue.
There you go.
But it was great. So kind of in conclusion, thank you for listening this week, fellow podcast listeners. We've had a great time with listener Tyler, who's a big fan of ours, and we're a big fan of his now. This has been Lotus and
QuicKarl.
And you can find us on Twitter at Socratic Podcast. We do have the Twitters. There's a big announcement coming up later this week regarding myself and the show. And we're going to do another episode this week, and then we're going to take probably a 3-week break after this show. But we'll announce that next show. And next show will be Friends, Romans, Countrymen. That will be the next show.
Let me hear yours. Wait, I can't hear if you give them to me.
It won't be Shakespearean focused, but it's more friendships and support and how people relate to each other, which I think would be it will dive more back into the philosophical. We've taken to more, this has been a pretty philosophical episode, but it dived back more into the ideas behind support from your neighbors and your friends and family. But you can also email us at socraticneighbors@gmail.com. Find us on iTunes. Leave us a review. You can find us on Google Play. You can leave us a review there, or you can find us on Podomatic. And don't leave us a review there, because we may not be on Podomatic much longer. It was great. It's great to have you on. Like I said before, I keep repeating myself, but it's great to have you on. Very look forward to talking with you some more later on. I know you got to get back to your family, and thanks so much for visiting with us. So,
Mi placer.
Bueno, señor.
Pasos los.
And I hope our listeners have a great week, and I hope that many safe travels to your family going home, wherever it is that you live, because you won't tell me.
We can't say you're going to Colorado next.
Yeah.
And you're headed to Alaska.
Yeah.
Well, he's going on vacation. He's on vacation, so who cares? But many safe travels to your destinations, and
thank you.
And back home as well. And I hope our listeners have a great week, and we'll sign off.